welcome to another edition, another chapter of Beyond the Brink and Fighting Back. We're going to talk today about the recent Supreme Court decision that guts the Voting Rights Act, according to critics of the decision. And I'm speaking with an old friend, Phyllis Jordan. She's an amazing reporter and researcher and writer. She's also a daughter of the South, raised in Lexington, Virginia. So she has a special affinity for information about what's happening in the South and politics. She's the perfect person to talk to about this ruling. But I have to admit, and she knows that she was my second choice to speak here today. I had originally asked a friend who is a professor at a state university in Florida. He is a Black professor, and his classes frequently touch on race. He is teaching students about how to cover and what to think about the civil rights movement. I thought that would be the perfect person. And he declined, not because he doesn't like me, we're still friends, but because of fear of his job. And to me, that seems indicative of the kind of atmosphere that we're facing today when DEI, anything having to do with our racial past, and seeing our society in terms of color has become passé or objectionable to the Trump regime. Phyllis, is that unfair of me to say, or do you agree?
I agree. I grew, as you said, I grew up in Virginia, and they integrated schools when I was in third grade. And I really thought that, things were changing. People were not using racial slurs, people were changing. And now I feel like things are going backwards.
Well, it's interesting because proponents of the decision, and that includes columnist George Will, a conservative, he agrees with the majority in the 6-3 Louisiana versus Calais decision that discrimination, blatant, intentional discrimination in the South is over. So no federal oversight or regulation is required anymore. And what the Voting Rights Act has been used for over the last, say, 40 years has not been to end discrimination, but to give blacks a leg up. They get guaranteed coverage or representation in some places, and that is unfair to whites. What do you say to that?
Um, I'm not surprised that George Will agrees with John Roberts. I mean, that's basically the position. And in some ways, the Voting Rights Act did take away those overt signs of discrimination. There's no poll tax, there's no literacy tax, there's no barrier like that to voting. But by 1981, and that's like 16 years after it's passed, there were still no black lawmakers in
Correct.
Georgia, Alabama, or Mississippi. Some of the states had a third of their voters were black, and there were still no black lawmaker, congressmen, and very few elected officials, period. In 1982, Congress sat to address that. And they said that they basically made an effects test. Like we have to look at what is the effect of policies, not just the intent of policies. And that
Right.
had an extraordinary effect that went from being like 1,500 black policymaker elected officials to 10,000 today. And what it did is it, allowed to consider what is the effect of this redistricting? What is the effect of this new voter registration policy? And that led to a big change. Now, when Congress was considering this effects rule in 1982, there was a guy at the um, Justice Department who was running interference, trying to shut it down. And his
Right.
name was John Roberts.
Oh, I'm so surprised.
And working with him in the Solicitor General's office was a guy
Alito.
named Samuel Alito. So these guys, I think Sherilyn Ifill calls it, this was their white whale. They have wanted to get rid of this for a long time. They have considered this unfair for a long time. And so they finally accomplished it. But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean racism is done. I mean, so you can break in if I'm
No,
talking too
no,
much.
this is an excellent lesson and you're explaining it exactly. So continue.
One of the one of the big steps that changed, basically the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. And in the last 20 years, it's been systematically gutted. And one of the first big
Right.
steps was 2013, when
Right.
the law included you had to ask permission or get advanced approval from the court to make changes in redistricting or voter registration, that sort of thing.
Right. It was
They,
supposed to be up to the court to make sure that equal racial access to voting was ensured by the plan you came up with. And that's
right.
been eliminated.
That was eliminated in 2013. And they used as evidence that there is now black voting numbers, um, black voter turnout was the same as white voter turnout. And they used as evidence the elections of 2008 and 2012. What's unique about those elections?
Barack Obama, they had a chance to actually get one of their own into power.
Right. And both those years, black and white voter turnout was the
Turnout.
same.
Mhm.
Now there's a 10-point gap in the presidential election between black and white voters. And in the midterms, the gap is like 19%. So
Right.
we no longer have that parity. Is that because we had two elections with a black candidate? Or is it because we did away with this pre-approval called pre-clearance that was required? I mean, um, Ruth Bader Ginsburg made that argument when they were trying to get rid of this advance approval and said, maybe the fact that we have equity in or parity in who's voting means that it's working. Why should we do away with something that's working? So anyway, that was the first step. There have been further cases, but this is probably the most serious. Um,
And you can see the result of that from the minute that this ruling came down. Louisiana stopped some primary elections, stopped the elections in progress so that they could redraw districts and get people voting in different places, maybe a different effect. And now Alabama and Tennessee are both looking at doing redistricting. So it isn't even an effect that we'll feel in the next election. We're feeling it right now.
exactly. And this could
And
well do away with a lot of seats that are held by black um, congressmen. And it's not just Congress, too. It's state legislatures. It's your
school
local
boards,
government. It's the
local
school
government.
board.
Yep,
Right.
yep, it is. It goes all the way down. The whole thing, the whole campaign reminds me of what happened with Roe v. Wade, which was very much contested, never accepted by the conservative movement, and they worked for years to gut it slowly. By 1,000 cuts, they eliminated it until Roe v. Wade itself was overturned. We seem
Right.
to have done the same with an act that's been called the most singular achievement of the civil rights era, and it's gone now.
Well, and it was, as I said, it was amended in 1982. It was re
It
uh,
was strengthened for a long
Brink,
time.
and
Strengthened.
even George W. Bush did a new version of it in 2006. It's not like this is, a 60-year-old law. It's a new, fresh thing that keeps being reinforced. But for the past 20 years, um, the Supreme Court has just chipped away at it and chipped away at it.
So my question is this the worst Supreme Court we have ever had? It's a question that I know constitutional scholars debate all the time. We've even discussed it on this podcast. Dred Scott is and the Taney Court. It's
Right.
probably
Very
that
bad.
they're listed as number one. But the columnist Gene Weingarten used to be at the Washington Post. I know you know him, Phyllis. Had an interesting column that Taney may be in the number two spot to the John Roberts Court. Dred Scott was a horrible, terrible decision that basically legalized slavery. It's awful. However, it was unique. The other decisions by the Taney Court were mostly leaning towards empowerment of the people and doing the sorts of protection of rights that you would expect the Supreme Court to do. Whereas this decision by the Roberts Court is one of a kind. It goes along with eliminating affirmative action. It goes along with previous decisions about voting. It goes along with taking away the right of access to abortion. It's one of a kind, and the argument is it may be the worst court of all time. Want to weigh in on that?
I would certainly say it's the least representative of the people of the United States. I mean, when you and I were growing up, there was a very progressive sense of society beyond things like abortion. I mean, environmental change. And
Right.
I felt the Supreme Court reflected that it was in tune with where the population was. Right now, the Supreme Court is making decisions that 80 to 90% of the population disagree with.
Right.
And and giving it a further sense of illegitimacy is the fact that two of the seats were kind of procured in unusual ways.
Right.
One, which is the seat that Brett Kavanaugh holds, should have been filled by Barack Obama, not Donald Trump.
Correct.
The Senate slow rolled it for a year. And then the second is Amy Coney Barrett's seat, which they filled in
They
2
did the
weeks.
opposite. Yeah, they did the
Right.
opposite. They
I
pushed it
mean,
right through.
neither of those things is illegal, but it does give a sense that it does not reflect what society reflects. So
Right.
I'm not going to say they're the worst Supreme Court, but I do think they're the most out of step with where society is. And I don't know, is it the role of the Supreme Court to be in step with society? I don't know, but as most of my life, I felt like the Supreme Court reflected where society was going. And then there was a certain progressivism to it, in not in a
Right.
political sense, but in a sense that the world is evolving. We
Right.
suddenly value the environment more than we used to. We suddenly value women's rights more than we used to. We suddenly value gay rights
Gay
and
rights.
those
And
things
now,
more than
now there's a sense that we're going in the other direction.
right, that the Supreme Court is more conservative than Congress. It's more conservative. Well, it's hard to know if it's more conservative than this president, but it's more conservative than the politics of America. It does not reflect what um,
Right.
what most Americans think.
So we've been talking about the consequences of this act, which I think are vast. The midterm elections. Well, I'm going to list them, and then we'll go back to them. Midterm elections coming right up could well be affected. The results could be affected by this. Fewer Black and Latino representatives and other minority representatives in Congress and in local government. Um, a race to redistrict the entire country. New York and blue states now are talking
Yeah,
about countering this Republican drive to get more seats by redistricting, which would, okay, increase Democratic votes perhaps, but will have the same effect of eliminating minority voters whose representation has been protected up to now.
right.
So, what does that look like for our future? And is there a way to undo this? Congress could make new laws. I don't see that happening. I'm very pessimistic about it, Phyllis. You tell me
Yeah.
realistically now what you see happening.
Well, and as you mentioned, and I've mentioned, I'm from Virginia, and I came up writing in journalism, writing about Virginia politics.
Right,
So I'm a bit uncomfortable with redistricting Virginia just did. And I now live in California, where we redistricted as well.
right,
But in both California and Virginia, they sought permission from the voters,
right,
which I feel is better. I honestly am not, I am feeling this is going to be a mess. Uh, I don't know what's going to happen in the short term. I just have to feel that this is going to maybe be the point that breaks the back and makes Congress say, we have got to get this redistricting under control. When Eric Holder left the Justice Department, he started an organization that was aimed to have fair redistricting. And
right,
there are rules to do it. There are ways to do it right. And the question is, as you sort of mentioned just a minute ago, some of the goals conflict with each other. For instance, if you're trying to have contiguous districts that represent communities, so communities have a voice, that doesn't always give you a minority voice.
correct.
So it's very complicated, but I'm hoping that I'm fearing the next few months or even few years are going to be a
Chaos.
mess, but that
Yeah,
maybe it will finally lead to reform. I mean, Watergate, for how horrible it was, led to open meeting laws and open um, records laws. And of course, people have been trying to circumvent them ever since. But there was reform. And I'm hoping that this period of history, not just on redistricting, but on things like emoluments clause and things like that, will lead to better rules and more reform. But until then, I mean, you mentioned Louisiana. I mean, it's just insane. They've already had 80,000 people vote in that election,
Correct.
and they're going to stop it now. I mean, the Supreme Court, and I know precedent means nothing anymore, but Supreme Court in 2006 said you can't do it that close to an election. So theoretically, they should not be able to stop this election and redistrict and do it again. But I'm not sure what will happen.
Two questions come to mind. One is I do have this hope. I don't know if I have enough evidence to say it really will happen, but a hope that people are so annoyed at what's been happening with the Trump administration. His his popularity is at a low, as you know, and that this is such a bold move by the Supreme Court to undo years of reform that worked, that has actually worked, that
Yeah.
people will vote regardless of what district they're forced to vote in to make change, and that we're still going to see big changes in the midterm. Is that a
I
vain hope?
actually, I actually agree. I mean, if you look at Texas, and they're saying now that they've spread their Republican vote so thin, and they were counting on Latino voters to come in for Republicans, that they could actually lose seats rather than gain seats in Texas. I haven't looked at the Florida map, but you used to report or
Mm-hmm.
vetted in Florida. I'm wondering the same thing. Like, how thin can you spread your Republican voters without actually losing seats? I think that's why some states like Indiana didn't end up redistricting. And
Right.
I don't know what is going to happen in Virginia. I don't know that they're actually going to get
Yeah.
10 seats. So,
It
yeah.
it, it is really interesting. Also, the reliance you mentioned on Latino voters, both in Florida and in Texas and elsewhere in the West, Southwest. Those voters, according to polls anyway, are increasingly leaving the Republican Party. They're not happy with their decision to have supported Trump. So it is a bit of a gamble to redistrict and hope that they will boost you into redness in these new districts. The second thing is, don't we have a tool right now that could end all of this, the complicated business of redistricting? AI could set up fair,
She said
nicely spaced, ungerrymandered districts across the whole map. Why
But
are we
who
not
sets
doing
the
that?
parameters? That's
Yeah.
it. I mean, AI could do it a lot faster, but someone would have to say, we want them to be contiguous, and we want them to you provide minority representation, and who's setting the parameters?
Yeah.
I think AI is only good as the people who are giving it the instructions.
Right. It could in fact be used to do just the opposite. What are the
Well,
districts that will give us the most Republican or the most Democratic votes? It can be used for evil as well.
Well, I
But
just
the,
feel like you come up with something new, and then people figure out ways to game it. In California, and I'm fairly
right.
new to California, we have a wide open primary. Top two vote getters go on to the general election. In a recent Senate election, the top two vote getters were Democrats. So two Democrats ran against each other.
Hmm.
Now there's a governor's race. There are two Republican candidates. There are 20 Democratic candidates, and none of them, and the Republicans are leading. So this could create a situation where you're actually a Democratic state has got two Republicans running for governor. Um, all that is to say, I think these Democrats legitimately are running, but who's to stop somebody from gaming the system? Beyond the
Right.
Democrats, there's all these other third party candidates. There's like
Correct.
50 candidates for governor. That's just to say you could come up with new ways to do this, and there's always going to be somebody gaming the system or finding a way to make it undemocratic.
John Roberts has, as you've mentioned, worked for decades now. So has Alito to got the voters' rights. They also have done away with a whole lot of the importance of precedent. Um, is this a rigged court? Is it
Um,
where it seems to be working, in my view, in the view of
well,
many, for conservative
yeah.
values, for Trump values.
Well, what's troubling too, the New York Times had a great story last week,
Right.
was it, about the shadow docket, which is a whole different way of doing things. That used to be
Yes.
used for things, simple things that were had to be done quickly, like a death penalty decision, but it's being used for major decisions. So
Correct.
I, it does seem that um, and what was interesting about precedent, in this decision, Alito says, "Oh, there's plenty of precedent we're following," and then he names all the court cases that
Yes.
he and Roberts put forward to get rid of the Voting Rights Act. So yeah, it's a problem. Um, I,
It is. And would you favor, as we called it, reform, but how would you reform this court? Put more justices on?
well,
Uh,
I'd start with an 18-year term, which I think
okay.
is good anyway, because why do you need an 84-year-old man on the Supreme Court or in the White House? Um, then I don't know about expanding the court. I feel like expanding the court just gets into a cycle. So Democrats get in and they add 3 seats, then Republicans get in and they add 3 more seats. So I'm a little less, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I go back and forth. I am disturbed highly that you have 9 people deciding such a major policy that will affect us and all citizens for the rest of our lives. It does not seem like enough. And then when you get down to 5 to 4 or 6 to 3 decisions, you're talking about 1 or 2 people making all the difference in our political lives. That worries me.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I'm not sure that increasing 3 or 4 fixes that. Then you have what, 2 or 4 people making the decisions instead of going back to the people. Is that much better?
I think that for too long, we have relied on Supreme Court to do the right thing. I mean, I think Congress started passing laws, or, I mean, for instance, back when Pat Schroeder was running for president, she
Hmm.
was trying, that was 82, 88,
The
whenever that
early
was,
the early '80s, yeah,
early 80s, was trying to get the Democrats to pass a law on abortion. They
right,
would not pass a law on
right.
abortion. They were scared to do it. So the Supreme Court did it for us. Supreme Court okayed gay marriage. The Supreme Court, we have relied on for too long. I mean, there's 3 branches of government. We can no longer rely on the Supreme Court to defend our freedoms. So
That's
we
right.
need to elect a better president, or a president and a Congress that is dedicated. If what we want are these things, we need to elect a president. We need to rely more on the other 2 branches of government.
Yeah, you make a good point. It used to be a dirty word to talk about activist judges because that was the right talking about left judges pushing progressive ideas and expansion of rights. But we now have an extremely activist conservative court. I don't like it very much. I know how those conservatives felt.
Right, right. But
They're good, Marshall. William Douglas. They were good.
yeah.
The Alito bad.
But we don't have to give them the power. We've got
Yeah,
2 other branches of government. Voters determine the 2 other branches of government. Let's get voting in the right people who will do the right thing.
right. It's also in the Supreme Court this week, not connected to Calais and the Louisiana decision. There was a ruling off of the secret docket, the shadow docket on the anti-abortion pill. A federal judge ruled that these pills cannot be mailed anywhere in the United States, even into states that do allow abortions or access to abortions. And his ruling was supposed to stand nationwide, except that the Supreme Court did just step in recently and said, no, 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 you can continue to mail while we decide the merits of the case. If we're talking about reforming the court, it's that shadow docket that I want to change the rules on. And the second thing would be requiring an ethics code that comports with other federal judges and teeth to enforce it, neither of which we have. I think the justices now, are free to act on their own political ideas. And the rules are set up so that no one watches them. They decide if they have to recuse themselves in cases where there's a conflict of interest. They
Right.
decide if something goes on a shadow docket. And that we have seen that abused terribly in the past couple years.
Right. And where I thought you were going with this, which is sort of something that surprises me. There are decisions that John Roberts has voted for, like um, the gay marriage decision. Olga Felder, I can't pronounce
Yeah,
that.
I know which one you mean. Yes.
But there are moments with the Supreme Court where you feel a sense of hope that there is a sense of progress. But
I
then,
Go ahead. I
yeah,
was going to say I try to feel that. I really do try to feel hope and optimism, but I do not. In the decisions that have gone against Trump, say tariff, especially tariff, and the abortion stuff, they always give an out. They go, you can't do it because this is what you did wrong. And therein is a blueprint to come back to us with this way, and we
yeah,
might decide differently. I'm not, and on this one, Voting Rights Act, there's nothing in there saying, if you change this or this, we might be able to allow it. They don't get a recipe for fixing. John
no, that's
Roberts.
right. You're
John
right.
Roberts' votes against the Trump administration have been very strategic and
Hmm.
limited. I think if it had been up to him, if he had written the majority decision on eliminating Roe v. Wade, he would not have eliminated. He would have done just what he's done with the
Yes.
Voting Rights Act, just gutted from the inside. So it
I thought
stands.
that's what they were going to do. I thought they were
Yeah,
going to come back with like a 10-week ban or
right,
some kind of crazy or a 6-week or something like
right.
that. I was surprised they overturned it. Um,
Yeah, I think because we call it the John Roberts Court, and he deserves all the blame that entails, but he's not in full control of that court. Alito has more power than he does. I also think Alito leaked the decision ahead of time, so
I
that
think
he,
so too.
yeah, or he or someone close to him, so that the court was kind of locked into sticking by it. And I dread decisions that they'll be making in the next few years too. That could further erode rights of all sorts.
But, Congress can pass laws to codify certain things. Of course, they did with the Voting Rights Act, but Congress,
Right.
if we elect a Congress that aligns with our values, we can have more power to make these changes without the Supreme Court or in
Well,
spite of the Supreme Court.
that would require, as I understand, the signature of a president, and Trump is going to veto anything that's along the lines that we're talking about here. So you actually need a president and a Congress that is
Yes,
willing to
and both
act.
of those depend on voters. That is
Exactly.
our superpower. We can vote for
All right.
now.
So how nervous are you about the midterm elections? Trump is pretty open about his efforts to suppress voting or to delay. The latest thing is that we delay elections so that everybody can redistrict to their heart's delight and then go back to voting. How optimistic are you that we're going to have meaningful midterms?
I go back and forth between being incredibly pessimistic and then recognizing that often what Trump tries to do, he fails at miserably because he's got it just because. Um, so for whatever reasons, he's not that effective at what he tries to do. Um, but uh, but I do worry that he's going to suppress the vote or interrupt the vote or that there's going to be some sort of um, terrorist attack a month before the election, which he'll call off the election. I am very worried about what he's going to do. And I hope the courts, including the Supreme Court, will stop the worst of that activity. But I'm
Do
not.
you do you see voters responding? The mass protests that are held like monthly now have gotten bigger and bigger. Is that enough? Is that a sign that any other politician in Congress or in the White House must pay attention to it? Do you
I
have
don't
hope?
think I don't think the White House is paying one lick of attention to it. I do think that congressmen are paying attention to it. They talk to their voters. They're seeing their poll numbers, are seeing Trump's poll numbers. There's a lot of places, surprising places. Texas, James Tallarico is now leading either one of the Republican candidates. So there's a lot of, I think Iowa, there's looks like a Democrat is doing well. There's a lot, and Kansas is a new candidate for Senate. Alaska, the Democratic candidate for Senate is leading.
Hmm.
Everyone who's in Congress can see these numbers, and everyone in the House is facing reelection, so they're going to see this. Do they hope that Trump will somehow save them by messing with the election, or I don't know where these. I don't know
I'm
where.
amazed to switch from the court to Congress for 1 minute. How do nothing this Congress has been. Very little has passed.
Right.
Has anything since the Trump tax
No, I don't think so. And it's kind of astounding. They've got a
Yeah.
threefer. They've got the Senate, the House, and the White House, and they can't get more done. I mean, think about Biden. For all the criticism of Biden, he had basically the same numbers. He had like a 51 or a
Right.
50-50 Senate. He had a very close House. He got huge bills passed. Um,
Hmm.
and this Congress is not doing that.
Okay, I want to go back to a topic that we had at the very beginning. I should tell my listeners I'm so into this conversation I've neglected to for those of you who are kind of tuning in midstream. This is Rosemary Armail with Beyond the Brink, and I'm talking with my old journalism colleague and writer and thinker Phyllis Jordan, who
You keep calling me old.
oh, I don't, I just mean like from long ago for a long endurance. She's very young at heart. Yeah, experience we don't value in this country anymore in politics, do we? And that's what you have. So I want to bring you back, Phyllis, to something we began talking about at the very beginning, and that is racism in any way, can you agree with the court that racism has subsided, especially in the South, that protections that we thought we needed after Jim Crow and the offenses of that period are not needed anymore because we've advanced? We had a black president. We have lots of black members in the caucus now, in the congressional caucuses. So protections by the court are not needed. Is there anything to that idea at all?
I mean, certainly the situation for Black people is better than it was in, say, 1965 in terms of getting to go to higher education. Every college is open to Black people. Getting to pursue higher, law degrees, and there's 10,000 elected Black officials versus I don't know how many there were in 1965, but in the thing I read in 1981, there was
Mm-hmm.
1,500. So
Mm-hmm.
certainly things are better than they were. You can't say it's like 1965, but you also can't say there's no racism. I mean, that's ridiculous. And, I'm not Black. I can't speak to what that feels like. But, you see it every day, all the time. And, to think that we had remedies that worked, that led to voter parity, voter turnout parity between Black and white people in 2008 and 2012, and we're like, oh, good, we're done. It's just kind of
We're
a
finished.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
we're
it. We're
finished.
done. Racism is passed.
Solved.
And then there's always, these racial slurs are just coming back. The kids think they're cool. And it's like, when I was a kid, anybody who used a racial slur was considered like, you know, an idiot. It
Low
was
life, low
well,
life.
low life.
They were just rude and wrong, and they were reprimanded. Now it's acceptable. Racism
It's sort of
seems,
funny. People think it's funny. It's like,
ugh,
it's not funny.
no.
Um, so, no,
Yeah, and the you mentioned access to colleges, but that also may be impacted by Trump administration policies like the end of affirmative action supported by the Supreme Court,
right,
no relief for loans, student loans, which adversely affects minority students more.
right,
And again, I point out that there are two white people talking about this on this program because it's dangerous for Black professionals,
right.
especially those
Yeah.
working for state institutions or government institutions, to come and talk openly about this. This is not, to me, a multicultural society that makes all people welcome. Oh, I sound
No.
so woke.
What are you doing? It's a
Yeah,
good
what am I
thing.
doing? Oh. I do love how the court, Alito especially, regards himself as colorblind. That's what he calls it, and instead of kowtowing to minorities as he sees it. He wants to treat everyone the same. And he sees our existing laws, the ones that he's pulling apart, as unfair to whites. I've never seen whites get really an unfair advantage in this country. Can you think of anything I'm not?
Yeah, I mean, it's really appalling that that's the position and that there's no recognition of the disadvantages that Black and Latino people face in this country, and that somehow white people are disadvantaged. And one going back to this decision on the Voting Rights Act, it's astounding that the amendments of the Constitution they used to gut the
Yes.
Voting Rights Act are the 14th and the 15th Amendments, which were specifically passed to protect Black people, to
Oh,
provide rights for Black people. And they're
very
saying
good point. Very
that
good
this
point.
is, yeah, I mean, it's just it's nonsense on stilts. It's turning things upside down because they feel like people are being disadvantaged. And how are they being disadvantaged? These people are on their Supreme Court.
Yes.
What sort of disadvantage have they faced in their lives?
Yeah, it all, this is such racism that we're seeing, and the kinds of things you're talking about, racial slurs becoming common, even and acceptable now. It all comes from the White House. It's just it's kind of depressing to watch it, I think.
Well, I just don't understand how our country reelected him.
We've talked about this, haven't
Yes,
we?
I just don't get it.
A felon. His policies were known, and this term has just been supported by Project 2025, has just been devastating, fast, and cutting right into some of the institutions and policies that we've held for so long. Do you see us coming back from this?
Yes, I see we have to. Um, I don't know that we completely come back. After World War II, before World War II, England, Great Britain was a world power. Afterwards, it was not. I mean, we may never regain our international position we had, the position of trust that we had with people overseas. We may never regain that. But I feel like, we're at our 250th birthday of the Declaration of Independence. We have a tradition of democracy here, even though that democracy was denied to women for the first century. It was denied to Black people I mean, they could vote by after the Civil War, but they couldn't legitimately
Couldn't
vote
really,
probably
yeah.
till like 65. We have a tradition of democracy. We have inculcated in all of us that we want to be a better society. And I just have to feel that we're going to turn it around. We're
Oh,
going to insist that we live by democratic values. And
I
I mean,
think that
small
you're,
democratic.
yeah, small democrat. I think that your "we" is the correct pronoun here. I keep looking for heroes, if you will, some singular leader to get us out of trouble, and I don't see it. I
Yeah.
see people saying the right thing, but they don't have the power to do anything about it, or people who have the power and they're not saying the right thing. So it's got to come from U.S. citizens standing up for this.
Yeah. And the
Oh,
first step is voting. It's
yeah,
voting in the midterm, voting in the presidential election.
it's true.
And it's
Well,
also educating. Like I've got to think people didn't understand what was at stake. You keep reading about these people who voted for Trump. Like, I didn't think I was voting for this. I'm like, what did you think you were voting for?
yeah.
Um, you know, it's got to have more education of the voters, more education in civics classes, more understanding of what's at stake.
Yeah, that is all true. We have just about run out of time. I've been speaking with Phyllis Jordan about the latest Supreme Court outrage decision. I think it's fair to call it. And we end this program with the toast. And my toast today will be to people of America standing up for fairness and rights for all, and a Supreme Court that really protects that, along with a Congress and a president who do the same. We don't have it right now. I hope we will in the future.